Just to introduce you to the faces on the screen. So I'm Mike Fraser, I'm the PI on pro². Steve, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Steve Hodges. I'm a researcher at Microsoft Research in the UK, and I've been working very closely with Mike and the others on this in bringing this whole project together. Super excited about the concept of democratizing hardware and easing the transition from prototype to product.
Brilliant. And Sarah, do you want to quickly introduce yourself too?
Hi everyone, I'm the pro² network manager and the person who's most likely been in contact with you thus far. Thanks for joining.
Brilliant. And we have various other members of the steering group on the call as well. So let me get started by sharing my screen, and then, as I say, we'll launch into questions afterwards. So, share. Okay, how are you guys seeing that? Is it visible?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so welcome to the pro² funding call webinar. So I'm, as I said, Mike Fraser. I'm the academic lead and the PI on the network grant coming to you from the University of Bristol. But we're a collaboration across a whole bunch of institutions, as Steve said, and I think I'm here representing really the network rather than my own institution. We'll do a brief meet the team. So I'm the academic lead at the University of Bristol, and Steve is the industry lead at Microsoft Research in Cambridge. Sarah, you've already met, is our network manager. We have a network designer employed in the network, and we can talk a little bit about his role later on, Matt Sutton. And then we also have oh, sorry, that's me going too far. We also have a team of co-Is on the project from a variety of partner institutions, some of whom are on the call. Jason's here from the University of Bath, Joe Finney from Lancaster, Boriana Kaleva from the University of Nottingham, and Rudo from the University of Bristol. So welcome to all of you as well. So that's the kind of the pro² team. We have been, I think, pro² has had a very long genesis, I suppose, as a funding program. It has its origins way back in about 2019, when we started as a community talking about ways of really growing this community at the intersection of democratizing hardware and joining together in a very broad way the ICT and manufacturing spheres of interest, because we felt there was kind of definitely a weakness in the connectivity between the two, and that weakness was causing actually quite major technical and societal challenges. So it's taken us quite a long time to get to this point, about 3 or 4 years, to really get through the pandemic and through the funding process. But we're really excited to be with you today to launch our first call for proposals. I suppose the context of that conversation is quite broad. So certainly within manufacturing, there's been a convergence towards the digital, and we think that in digital manufacturing, there's certainly a lot of interest in what we're doing here. Oh, hello. And absolutely interested in all the work that's going on in that sphere, albeit that much of it, I think, is not specifically about computer hardware, but quite often about software for manufacturing. A lot of work in prototyping platforms that many of us in this community have been involved in, and I think those the context of platforms like Arduino and Raspberry Pi are really important here. And certainly part of the conversation has been about the idea that maybe those platforms are really making prototyping incredibly accessible and strong, but sometimes at the expense of scaling and making products rather than prototypes. And so that's definitely formed part of the conversation. We've been, I think, involved in conversations about materials design, the convergence of materials design, particularly product design and electronic design converging in materials design, and this idea that prototyping is increasingly complex, increasingly requires both digital and physical components. We've talked about simulation tools and fabrication tools becoming more interactive and more accessible, but that maybe not space maybe not moving as quickly as it might do. We've had conversations about proprietary formats, and particularly this idea that, Steve, I'm going to take your narratives here, but this idea of the long tail of hardware, and that really we have an unmet need in low to medium volume manufacturing of digital products, by virtue of the fact that there really aren't platforms and systems which underpin and support the delivery of those. And then we've talked about just the inherent costs of scalability and how that might inhibit actually really quite important low volume applications. So there's some context ideas that have kind of led to this point. So that context has led to, I think, a set of opportunities which we're going to express in funding calls through pro², and I'll come to the theme of the call in a minute. But really, that's the kind of the core of what we're core of the trajectory of what we've been interested in. We wrote a proposal for EPSRC, which had a whole bunch of supporters, and here are some of them. The letters of support we received in partnerships, which was fantastic. And then we've also held an initial launch event in Bristol recently, which was attended by a whole bunch more partners. And I think I can see on my next slide a list of people who came to that, registered and came to that as well. So we're really seen a lot of interest already from both academic and industrial partners, which is really exciting. We're very much hoping to grow the network into a sort of a forum for discussion and advocacy in this space, and I think the more partnerships we have, people actually participating in that conversation, the stronger we're going to get. So it's really important for us to grow the network as part of these sorts of activities. And then over the 3 years, our funding from EPSRC is a 5-year program from this year through to 2028, and we've received commitments from EPSRC and from partners of something like £3 million over the 5 years. And we will be funding sort of in a very broad way across those 3 years joint academic industry projects into commons, and this is the first call for proposals of that set of funding. We'll also be looking at funding things like events, workshops and hackathons, and we'll be looking at policy engagement and horizon scanning reviews as well. So there'll be a range of mechanisms by which we really try and advocate for this area across industry, academia and government, so the funding will go into a variety of mechanisms to make that happen, but a significant section of it will be in this joint academic industrial projects. Okay, let me just move the slide on. So this is our first funding call, as I said, following on from the really exciting launch event that we held. There is a total fund coming from pro² into this call of £400,000, and I'll describe exactly what that means in terms of bidding later on. The maximum award that we will be awarding is £80,000. Opening date was the 5th of May, and we launched on the website and via all of our email and social media channels on that date. And then our closing date is the 15th of June, so not that far away, about 3 weeks' time. The priority area for the call is replicability. I need to learn how to say that quickly. And this is the kind of description, the kind of high top level description of what replicability means to us in the context of the call. So the applicants for the funding have to create either a new tool, a technique, a process, or a platform. And that new creation has to be effective in making it easier for a person or an organization to replicate a prototype of a digital device. So replication here, we're sort of aware that replication can mean different things to different people, and here we're specifically focusing on replicating digital devices. And the prototype in this case can include either conventional or unconventional electronics. So we've had a lot of conversations at the launch event and elsewhere about what the scope of digital device actually means, and I think we conceive of that scope very broadly. Is an initial response to that question. So it might be something very, very conventional in the sense that it involves circuit boards and silicon kind of combinations, but we're also interested in unconventional electronics, be that unconventional materials, product design materials combined with digital approaches, things which include the physical, possibly even things which include unconventional approaches to the electronics themselves, such as novel materials and so on. Okay, so that's our kind of replicability priority area. The funding available, so each project will last between 6 and 12 months that we're going to fund, and mustn't exceed that year maximum. The project costing will be up to £500,000 will be available full economic costing, of which we're going to provide £400,000. So we expect an 80% full economic cost in UKRI funded institutions. And what that means is that when you're costing individual projects, the maximum project size would be £100,000 at 100% full economic cost, and pro² would provide 80% of that as a maximum. Sub-award terms and conditions of the grant are going to be available on the website imminently, and are broadly comparable with EPSRC's own award terms and conditions. Yeah, I can answer any detailed questions about those in the queries. Eligibility, we've stipulated that applicants have to be members of pro². It doesn't cost anything to join. This is just simply so we know we're able to collate who's available on the who's interested and available to work on these kinds of ideas, and make sure that we're able to monitor and grow the network. So you must be members of pro², but simply that involves, if you're not already, going on our database and getting in touch with Sarah. Each project must include at least one academic and one industry-based project partner. And we also allow subcontractors in terms of industry participation, but they have to be carefully justified as separate from the project partner, and there must be one project partner. And finally, the academic institution must be eligible to receive UKRI funding, which I think is almost all academic institutions. But that's because we receive UKRI funding, we can only then sub-award that funding to a UKRI eligible institutions ourselves. Okay. So the assessment of the projects will be by panel of the steering group, and these are the criteria by which that assessment will take place. We'll be looking at the applicability to the theme of replicability, replication, that the proposals have realistic and achievable objectives and a work plan, that there's a clear demonstration of how the project contributes to solving the problem that's being specified, that there's evidence of co-creation with your industrial partner, that the project has properly considered equality, diversity and inclusivity aspects, and has probably considered sustainability aspects of what's being proposed. There's more detail about each of those and what we'd like you to consider on the website too. We'll, of course, because this is research funding, be looking at novelty of the approach, and we'll be looking at the impact and applicability of the outcomes outside of academia. And again, happy to answer any more detailed questions on any of these criteria. Okay, so we're running this webinar as a kind of a process to make sure that you understand what we're looking for and what we're asking for. If you're looking for partnerships specifically, then this is a fantastic place to start, and I see some of you introducing yourselves on the chat already, which is great to see. If you would like our support in matchmaking, that you would like to contact us, you're in industry, you would like to contact us to ask whether there are suitable academic partners for your work, or you're in academia and you're looking for an industrial partner to fit a particular idea that you have, then we're very happy for you to get in touch with us to support any matchmaking that might be possible across existing members of the network. And if there are any other things that you wish to know, then just get in touch with us. There's our email address there, admin@pro².org. We'll put you in touch with Sarah Hughes or Maura Lydon, who are our management team in the network. And yeah, do get in touch with us about any questions about scope or partnership opportunities through to the closing date for the call, or alternatively ask now. I'm sure if you have a question, then other people are thinking the same thing and would really appreciate an answer to that question, and that's what we're here for. Okay, so without further ado, I think I am going to close the presentation and stop there. Excellent. And open up to questions. So would Sarah, you're moderating this part of the process. Would you like to give us instructions about how the question and answer session is going to go?
Yeah, if people could use the raise hand function, that would be easiest, and it typically lists out the order in that happens in. So
and do say if you've got a question for a particular one of us. If not, I will triage the questions. Steve.
I can start if you want. So just watching you go through the the presentation and the requirements in terms of the size of the project. Just a clarifying question then: if a university got together with an academic with an industry partner, and the industry partner was to make a contribution either in cash or maybe in kind, then the value of the project, I'm thinking, could be, or I should turn it into a question, could the value of the project be more than 100,000? Because the limit what the university can claim is 80% of 100,000 from us, but if the project was bigger, that would be okay, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, so the cap on funding is just a cap on funding that's coming through the network. But if you can use that income as a kind of a multiplier on things, either through your industry partner or through other mechanisms, then absolutely we're very much encouraging of that. Yeah.
Marcos?
Hi. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So I'm from the University of Toulouse in France, and I had two questions. First is that, so I saw that we have to be eligible through some kind of UK validation or institution. So how do we know if we are eligible? Because we are a foreign university. That's my first question. And the second one will be, so we have to find a company. The company also needs to be in the network. And if not, is it possible for the company to be a company from outside of UK, or does it need to be a UK company?
Okay, both good questions. So I think I'll start. Feel free to chip in, anyone else from the steering group. So yeah, we have a limitation on our award from the UK research councils from UKRI that we are only, because it's UK taxpayers funding, we are not allowed to directly distribute it to institutions that aren't eligible to hold that funding themselves via full economic costing mechanisms. We're kind of aware that I mean, I don't think that limitation is especially helpful, but it's a sort of limitation of the funding source, if you like. So what I'd recommend is that if so just to answer your first question, I'd recommend if you have collaborators in the UK and you want to work together, then one sensible mechanism would be to look at ways of bidding through a UK institution which might be able to host things like a secondment as part of the funding to that institution, or a collaboration of some form which could then be funded through a UK eligible institution. And that I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Obviously, you're going to have to evidence your role in that, but we'd expect that to come through evidence of things like expertise and the opportunity that the collaboration affords and so on. On your second question, we don't have any limitations on the project partnerships being based within the UK, because we are not directly funding or awarding funding to those project partners. Obviously, again, we'd want to see evidence of collaboration, and that industry partner was actively involved in the co-creation of the work and going to be engaged in the work. But given that many of the challenges that we're talking about are international challenges, fundamental international challenges that cross national boundaries, for sure we'd be interested in international solutions to those challenges. Absolutely.
Yeah, just I think our motivation for having industrial partners is to make sure the work's relevant. So from that perspective, it doesn't matter where the partner is. It's more that, like, someone from an industry perspective thinks this is a useful, topic or a useful challenge to try and address. And like Mike says, we don't have that requirement. We don't have that restriction because we're not funding their industry partner. So we'd be open to them being, global.
Thank you. David has their hand up, and then I think we also have a question in the chat after that.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
My name is David Gomez. I'm also an assistant professor in France, at Estia, and I have a question regarding the number of partners, because I didn't understand very well. So it's only one partner from UK and one partner from one partner from industry and one partner from academy, or it can be several partners from industry and several partners from academy. So that's my question.
Yeah, so it's at least one of each.
At least one.
At least one of each. I think given the funding levels that we're advertising, obviously there comes a point at which the funding is spread very thinly across academic institutions. So yeah, we don't have the funding levels to be able to fund sort of major sort of programs of activity across many partners. But if you're talking about pilot project work to, I guess, across collaborators that are interested, then there can be sure as many as you want. Frankly, it's more that we have to have at least one of each. Yeah.
So thank you. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I mean, there's a trade-off, because if you have too many partners, then what's actually going to get done or happen. But of course, we're the pro² network, so in a way, if you're bringing more people in, that it's so much the better. It's got to be clear what it is, what the proposal is, what the deliverable would be. But if there's a way of involving several universities where there's truly like resonance, and in particular if there's a way of involving several industrial partners, I think where again they all see it as relevant, then that would so much better. I think just that we're also being just very honest. Like Mike said, we're not offering a huge amount of money, so we're not. It would be unfair to expect you to go and find 10 industry partners to collaborate on a project, because there's quite a lot of work. We know that's quite a lot of work, and these are relatively small projects. But if you can, or if you already have that set up, then so much the better.
Okay, one second question. All partners must be eligible for funding, or only one, or what's the minimum?
So it's the academic partners that receive the direct funding.
Okay.
And so they must be there must be an eligible academic partner to receive that funding. Otherwise, we can't give the money to anyone. But yeah, as I said, if you're looking at a collaboration which involves secondments, which involves subcontracts, then we also kind of mention those on our website as potential opportunities. And yeah, so that there are absolutely ways of the kind of the lead institution, the lead academic institution who is eligible to host the UKRI funding, then kind of costing in things like secondments or subcontracts or what have you. There's more detail about that on the website about how what's eligible, but fundamentally the funding comes from UKRI, and so the UKRI kind of regulations about us sub-awarding the money from the network into institutions means that we have to have at least one UKRI eligible institution involved in the project and leading, so that we can send the money on to them.
So basically, I mean, most of these UKRI eligible institutions are basically the UK universities. It's a little bit of a slightly different definition, slightly broader than that, but but you would need to have at least one UK university broadly, right, who would receive the money. As part of that, what Mike is saying, maybe there's a mechanism for them to fund, like an overseas university, like a university in France, through secondment or through subcontract. But there's also potentially, if you're looking for an opportunity to work with the UK university and the UK university needs a bit of funding to bootstrap that, but you don't, then that would be another mechanism, right? We'd love to have you as partners, even if there was only exchange of ideas rather than, working together rather than exchange of money. If that helps clarify as well.
Thank you very much. And my final question, if I understood well, so the maximum, the limitation of the cost of the project must be £100,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, with two caveats, that is correct, right? So the first caveat being what Steve raised as his first question, that obviously industry contributions can be on top of that, or other partner contributions can be on top of that. And then the second caveat being that this is full economic costing. This is a system we use in the UK to award funding from government to academic institutions. And the way that full economic costing works, I'm not going to try and describe in huge amounts of detail here, but it's incredibly complex. But broadly, what that means is that when a UK university bids for £100,000 to a UKRI funding source, they will receive £80,000 from that funding source, and then £20,000 is provided by the local institution, by that UK university, to top up that grant funding to £100,000. So this is no different from that situation in a project of £100,000 size. We would be providing from the pro² network £80,000 to that institution, and then the local institution, the UK university, would be providing the other £20,000 to top up. Yeah.
Thank you. It's okay.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat, and then we'll come to somebody else that I think raised a hand. So we've got a question from John Hardy. Will the academic or the industry partner lead the project? And also, does it go through the same/similar assessment process as normal as Innovate UK funding?
Okay, yeah. So I'll do the first of those. So I think in terms of project leadership, there are some things that the academic partner will have to lead on, because they're in receipt of the funding. That will place an obligation on them for things like financial reporting, back to on the spending of that funding, and so. So what if that's what you mean by lead in the context of things like financial reporting and so on, then that would have to happen with the academic partner. How you actually manage the project yourselves, I think we are up for innovative collaboration models between academia and industry. So if by lead you mean actually manage and organise the work, then I think it's up to you to propose what best suits the project's requirement that you're proposing. Does it go through the same similar assessment process as a normal Innovate UK funding? So Innovate UK funding follows a slightly different process than typical UKRI funding, but they are relatively strongly aligned. There will be a panel assessment review process. The panel will be made up of the members of the steering group of the network, and there will be criteria that I already outlined in my presentation that the proposals will be scored or against. All of those are common to both UKRI and Innovate UK funding. I suppose where we're different from typical UKRI process is that UKRI would typically separate the reviewers from the panels, and those would be different groups of people, whereas Innovate is much more integrated. I think we're also going to be integrating those two things together in this first call, and having the panel, having the steering group both review and panel represent the proposals. Yeah. Let me know, John, further down in the chat if you want to follow up on any of that. Could you clarify the definition of digital devices? This sounds like a team job. Steve, do you want to start with that, and I'll go second?
Yes, I think Mike hinted at this earlier on. We're fairly broad, so fundamentally we mean things with electronics in them. So if you came and it was an analog, it was some kind of clever analog sensor or analog thing, then we might be okay with that, I think, in fact. But we expect that that's very rare these days. It's kind of pretty much everything's got a microcontroller in it, some kind of digital logic in it at least. So I think we mean electronic devices, and if that helps. As Mike mentioned, we sort of split this into very broadly, very crudely, so sorry about that, into two categories. We think of conventional electronics and unconventional. And again, that's very, sort of quite a loose definition. But by conventional, we sort of mean, probably rigid circuit boards or Kapton based, standard flex circuit boards with surface mount components. Probably could be through-hole components, but standard soldering, standard components, the kind of components you can buy from, DigiKey or Farnell or whoever. And there's a well understood process for soldering these things down and making your device. We think that a lot of people do this, use this technique for prototyping, but moving beyond the prototype and moving to the production of dependable devices is still a bit of a challenge, especially at low volume. So we're quite interested in this long tail that Mike mentioned, how you enable a long tail of devices, high mix, rather than the mass-produced devices that we know how to manufacture really well. And it's not just about manufacturing, not just about designing them and manufacturing. You've got to think about things like testing them and how you package them and how you design for many aspects of design for manufacturability. So that's conventional electronics. And then unconventional electronics is kind of like everything else. So we're thinking about printed electronics, printed displays, printed transistors, working with fabrics, integrating electronics into wearables, but in textiles, for example. We think about smart materials, metamaterials, how you integrate 3D printing with electronic devices, anything that isn't a fairly standard established manufacturing process. And I think, because of that distinction, when it comes to more conventional stuff, where we kind of know how to prototype with conventional electronics, and we're really interested in how you drive that transition to production. With some of the unconventional stuff, maybe one person knows how to prototype this. Maybe they'd even have a hard time replicating it themselves, because they come in the lab a week later and some things have changed, and the materials they were using have just changed their composition a little bit. And so in that sense, replication isn't necessarily about a move to full-on production. Replication is perhaps helping yourself replicate what you built last week or last month or last year, or helping other research labs take some work that's happened and build on top of it. So replication means maybe slightly different things in those two categories of electronics. And we use the term digital devices, again, quite loosely as a broad catch-all for that.
That was great. I'm not even going to say anything else because it was so good. Thank you, Steve. That was really good. And yeah, as Steve says, these the idea of replication maybe varies depending on the challenge level involved, and how established the kind of the device pipeline maybe is for different forms of manufacturing and systems. And I guess it would be nice to be able to hear in the proposal what's novel about what you're proposing, essentially. And maybe that actually leads us quite nicely into the next question, which is what TRL level are you looking to fund? And so I think we've talked about this quite a lot. It's actually there's a straight answer to this question and a subtle one, and I'll try and do both. So the straight answer to what TRL are you trying to fund is this is research funding, so it has to be low TRL. And
Mike, sorry to interrupt. Could you just explain what TRL and MRL are for anyone that doesn't know?
Technology readiness level, essentially. So these are the readiness levels of the technology, and broadly a low readiness level means that it's quite far from reproducible, quite far from readiness for market and application. A high number would suggest that this is really quite more development than research, I suppose. And so yeah, this is research funding. So the idea would be that this would be a low technology low readiness level core. That's what research funding is for. And so yeah, I'd be looking 1 to 3 for those of you who are kind of aware of scales in those kind of low levels, and the lower the better. However, let me kind of caveat that, and here's the caveat. We think that traditionally prototyping has been considered low TRL and production has been considered high TRL. Right, so there's this kind of notion that that making one of something is research and making lots of something is development. But actually, this call, I think in many ways is trying to undercut that idea that actually there are some fundamental challenges in production, and that those fundamental challenges, particularly about sharing and understanding together as a community how we produce things and how we move from prototyping to production, I think we consider to be actually quite a low technology readiness level issue, right? And so there are fundamental research challenges in production is our point of view, and so we wouldn't want people to sort of go away with the idea that we were looking for only novel prototyping processes rather than novel production processes, because actually there are really fundamental challenges in production, and we consider those to be low TRL challenges. Is that an answer, Stuart? Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I think you touched on it there, which is you may have a reasonably high technology readiness level, but you may not be ready to productionize that. And that was the difference between the MRL and the TRL, and which bit were you looking to fund? That was the sort of the question I was looking in on that.
So I think the key issue here is what comes down to is, do you think that there's a problem in the production process to solve that other people need, want, and would value? Yeah, and so if your case study, if your particular example is is something which a challenge which a lot of people are facing, and has a sort of a generalizability across many different applications, many different technologies, we don't actually care that your circuit board is relatively stable and well established. What we care about is could other people learn from you addressing those challenges in turning that into a product rather than a prototype, and would that learning be an output of the funding, and that for me that would make it a low TRL kind of project, and therefore really on point for us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I can, if it's okay, Mike, I'm going to sort of follow up with another question around this, or an observation and a question. So I suspect, I mean, like everything in life is a bit subjective, right? So these TRLs are maybe a little bit subjective, and some research, some academics are very theoretical and would very naturally be, the very low TRLs because they're thinking about theories and concepts and developing them. Other researchers are more applied, and I think that in our research area, we'd probably consider ourselves to be more applied. We like building stuff, right? So we're doing new things, we're inventing new concepts, maybe even at a high level, thinking of new paradigms, but we're also quite hands-on and building things. So I think that I'd want to, perhaps just to clarify, when we talk about low TRL and the expectations of the UKRI and funding academic research, but like in terms of the people in this group and what we want to achieve, we don't just want, it's not just theoretical stuff. So when I look at the definition of TRL on the Wikipedia page, which I pulled up to share with folks on the chat, in the middle we've got technology demonstrators at the sort of 5-6 level, and we're absolutely, I believe, we're really keen on having demonstrators, right? We'd like to have, if we've got to build a proof of concept, show us how this thing works. Make some devices, show how you made devices more replicable. So I feel like, and if we went, maybe there's some basic research, but I wouldn't want us to lose sight of the fact that we want to make progress here. We're looking, we want to have real examples as much as we can, and often that very low TRL stuff is less relevant to industry as well. So we're not right at the top. We're not like trying to make a product, but in itself, right? But we're trying to, I mean, ironically, we're trying to work out how to enable people to make products. But so depending on your view, or it's quite subjective when you look at this TRL, but I wouldn't want to put people off actually think about building artifacts and proofs of concept and that kind of stuff, which some people might say is sitting in the middle, and I think that's still in scope, but it's kind of I see Mike nodding, but please.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Great. So next up on the chat, who is it? Should we already have a prototype of a digital device to replicate it as the starting point? If so, should such a starting prototype be physical or virtual? So I think I'll come back to what Steve said earlier about conventional, unconventional. I think some prototypes will be further from market than others, and have less reliable replicability pipelines than others. And so I think the answer to your question is kind of, it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do and what you think is challenging and novel about it. If you think it's challenging and novel to make it physical and you've already got a virtual one, then really express that challenge and that novelty. If you think it's relatively simple to make one of what you've got, and it's already ready to go, but it's really, really hard to make two, then tell us why that is. If it's really easy to make two, but it's really hard to make 1,000, then tell us why that is, right? So I think I'm going to kind of slightly push that question back on you, Uffa, and say the answer to your question has to be in your proposal, and as long as it's credible, then we think it's eligible. Yeah. But
again, to clarify a little bit, if you've got a device and you just want to make more of them because you want to run some experiment with more devices, that's not necessarily what we're looking to support. It's just someone who's got a device who wants to make more of them. If you've got a device and you've tried to make more of them, or you understand what it was involved in making one of them, and you realize how hard it is to make, you believe it's hard to make more of them, then that's the problem we're interested in a little bit more. So by all means, we want to encourage people to make more devices, but as they're doing it, think about how to make that easier next time, or how to address particular problems. So you don't have to have a specific device in mind, but probably you've got some experience with other devices that, maybe a device or more than one device that you built in the past that's got you thinking about the generic problem or the overarching problem of replicability, rather than it's just like, well, I just want to make more copies of this one.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Steve. That's helpful. Next up, Ollie Hanton, are there limitations in being involved in more than one project? As a follow-up, are there limitations regarding successful applications and applying for subsequent pro² funding calls? So I think that's relatively simple. No, there aren't limitations. Not no, you can't apply. No, there aren't any limitations. I think no is the answer to both your questions there. Ollie? Okay. So that's the end of our text chat. Anyone got any hands up?
There's one up, is there?
Yes, we've got a hand raised from Fayez Iqbal.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. So I'm an academic from Uni of Lincoln, and so I am in touch with an industrial partner, and my question is, they make digital devices, but not at a mass scale. Their market is more of a on-demand basis. So it's every time there's a new design, and then that has to be prototyped, and then that has to be made for them. In the transition, they have a lot of challenges, and me with one of my students have got some sort of solution for them, and we would like to explore the solution if it is actually applicable at that scale for them. So perhaps the question is that the solution may perhaps not be applicable to a lot of other people. It may be, because we don't know yet, but because this is a on-demand basis, they have their customers who demand that we need this device. Okay, we have a new application and we need this device for them. And their products usually are 5 to 8 years or 8 to 10 years of service life. So it's not a very big mass scale production that they're looking for, but they do produce significant numbers. So if that is the case, then I suspect that it means the solutions that we may develop may not be applicable to a lot of other industries, but it is still a solution that may help at least them and maybe some more of the similar. Perhaps when we develop it and document it and publish it, then some other people may look at it through the network events, etc. So
absolutely,
is that a flag?
That's great. That's great. Absolutely great. And I think those I think I very briefly mentioned earlier on, but I'll really emphasize it in answer to your question. I think we're especially interested in low to medium volume applications, and I'll try and explain why. Not to say we want to exclude high volume applications, but I think with high volume applications, generally you expect with a high volume application there's enough market that you can kind of afford to keep your knowledge in-house and your team sort of big and proprietary, and there's just the scale of the market enables you to do that, and so generally with high volume applications there's less sharing of knowledge around and about the place outside of the institution that's doing the manufacturing. I think for us, that in many ways a lot of low to medium volume applications get rejected at the prototyping stage because there isn't simple sets of tools and processes and techniques to really help those things scale at very small margins. And so one of the things that we have really talked about a lot as a reason for setting up the network is how we make the whole process of knowledge sharing, and technique sharing, tools, platform sharing better in hardware in order to enable some more of those low to medium volume applications to come through, right? I think as computer scientists, I know that software routinely does this, right? As it's so easy to scale software now, and do it with very little upfront investment and with very small market, downstream market. And in an ideal world, for me, manufacturing would be more like that, right? It would be just more scalable and more open community. And so in that sense, low volume, I think, is particularly interesting for us. I think it's fair to say.
Right, thank you so much. That's
I mean, in some ways, maybe this is a little bit an extreme view, but you could argue our whole pro² network proposition. I mean, this is research funding that we've got from the UKRA. We have some research hypothesis, and we're trying to explore it during the course of this project. Our hypothesis is in some ways based on what you just said, sort of being true. You're saying, right, I'm not sure how much it will apply to other people, but our hypothesis is that actually, if we take these individual problems that people have, then they will aggregate up, they will bubble up, and then we can unlock this long tail. So I think what you're talking about sounds really, absolutely spot on. And of course, if we look at it and we have a whole bunch of proposals that are looking at different things in that same category, we might have to rank them on in a number of metrics, including like how much we think they might apply to others. But what you described sound perfect.
relevant. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
It doesn't look like we have any further questions at the moment, but I think it would be worth mentioning to everyone that in the spirit of sharing and making things available for everyone, that as one of the aims of what we do with this funding call is to ensure that whatever is created with the funding is subsequently available to anybody that might need or want to use it. And so those are the terms that we will be applying to the sub-award agreement. The exact wording is being worked out currently, and we hope to add a copy of the sub-award agreement to the website very soon. But we just thought it was useful to let everybody know that that is what we're aiming for. And if you have any questions or concerns or feedback about that, please do let us know.
Yeah, and it's worth just emphasizing that we're not there talking about background IP. So if you have an existing device, we're not asking that you make that that IP freely available to the network as part of the funding call. But that where the kind of learning is taking place in the project that Steve's talking about, the outputs of the research taking place, that we would expect that to be openly available to others for exactly the sorts of scalability reasons that we've just discussed.
Yeah, like just to come back to the point that Mike raised before, if you're a big company, I mean, perhaps like Microsoft or certainly, Apple's a great example, huge manufacturing company, you've got these incredible economies of scale, you've got a large cash coming through the system, so you can afford to invest in replicability of your specific products, and they know how to do that super well. But if you're at the other extreme and you're a small company, then you can't afford to make those deep investments in the underlying technology to how you replicate. You just have to use what's available, because you're doing as best as you can just to get your product, develop your product, and get it out of the door. And so what we're trying to do with this pro² network is collectively sort of almost build a network, build a collective who all have a vested interest, a shared interest in sort of unlocking this long tail, in easing that replicability at low volumes where no one company or one institution can afford to do it for themselves like the big companies can. And so that is kind of part of our ethos here, is to try and collectively get together, introduce innovation. Like if you think about the example that we use is, or one of the examples we use, if you think about what happened in the movie industry and and film watching, and it used to be that to consume a movie you had to go to the movie theater and you pay your money, and it was kind of quite constrained. There were there's kind of networks of movie theaters, but then Netflix came along and they leveraged technology to say, well, we've got streaming now, we can stream the movies, we've got recommender systems, so you can enable a lot more movies to be available, but actually you can help people sort through them and find them. We can do online payments, so we can actually afford to run this service now. And now in the in the YouTube generation, movie creation or video creation has now been democratized too. That's all through technology, right? These technological innovations have unlocked a long tail of video production and consumption. And can we try and do a similar thing, maybe not quite at that scale, but can we do a similar kind of thing for device creation and device availability?
So as I said at the end of my presentation, we are here to answer your questions beyond this webinar. Very happy to for you to get in touch with the team via the website, via our shared email, admin@pro².org, with any questions that come up as you write your proposals through the next couple of weeks. Please do get in touch with any questions that you've got. Very much encourage all of you who think you're eligible to apply. We'd like to really grow some really exciting work here. We're right at the start of the network, so the opportunities to really get involved and do a lot over the next few years are here, and really hope that you're up for getting involved and joining us on the journey. If nobody has any more questions, then I think we're happy to wrap up there. Sarah, have you got anything?
I just want to add some key takeaways before everybody leaves. So we would like everybody applying to be members of the network. It's free to join, and it just takes a few minutes to fill out the form, which is on the website. So please do that, and encourage your collaborators to do that if they haven't done that already.
Sorry, can I just to say that I think two reasons to do that, just so that you understand why we're asking. One is we will at some point someone will look to see who's joined a membership. So if you like what we're doing, if you want to support what we're doing, then please join, because I think that helps us ultimately. And the second thing is a little bit more practical and a bit more short term. But if you've joined, then essentially you've clicked a box to say yes, you're happy for us to have your email and to contact you about. It's very infrequent, right? But we'll let you know about events like this. And otherwise, if you don't join, we might lose track of you, and you might miss out on something. So I think there are two reasons why that's important. Sorry, Sarah.
Yes, that's okay. That's good, useful to mention. Everything that we've talked about today is on the website, and we've also made a list of the questions and answers from the webinar, and we'll be putting those on the website so you can check back and have a look at them if you can't remember exactly what we discussed. The application form is on the website for you to download. Please do download and take a look at that and let us know if you have any questions. If you downloaded it before last Friday, then please re-download it, because we did have to add a couple of things to it to clarify. And the other thing is, with your application form, we do need a letter of support from your industry partners and contributors. So please do also remember to do that. Those are the main points.
Brilliant, thank you, Sarah. That's a really good list to take away for everyone. So yeah, without any final questions, I think we'll wrap it up and call it a day there.